Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is March 23rd, 2017. I'm tuning in from the basement of my home in North Logan, Utah, and I'm really excited to have with me two people who have made a pretty big impact on Mormonism in a pretty short time. They are Ryan McKnight and Scott Fausett, two of the main leaders behind MormonLeaks. And so today we're going to be doing sort of three things. We're going to be learning a little bit about Ryan and Scott and their backgrounds and what led to them wanting to do this project. Then we're going to talk about the project itself, how they did it, what was hard about it, how they structured it, what's been sort of the main reactions to it, and then we want to take questions and comments from our listeners. We hope that we won't just have sympathetic people who are listening and asking questions and giving comments. We hope that those who don't like MormonLeaks will also share comments and questions as well, and we can have a healthy dialogue. And we're doing this live streamed to Facebook Live, so that we can have a collaboration. We also have people joined us through Zoom itself. And so we're just excited. So with that, Ryan McKnight, welcome to Mormon Stories Podcast. Again, welcome back.
Hello, how you doing? Thanks for inviting us to do this. And on your point real quick about the questions, No questions are off limits. So if anybody, keep it respectful, but we'll take any question no matter how challenging it might be.
Are you a confirmed homosexual?
I'm sure in the eyes of Dallin Oaks I am.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. I couldn't resist.
That
was a joke.
We joke about this constantly behind
that was actually a MormonLeaks contextual inside joke.
Yeah.
Because for those who don't know, one of the videos MormonLeaks offered was a video of Dallin H. Oaks and other apostles discussing WikiLeaks, and the founder of WikiLeaks was Julian Assange. And
they were talking about how Chelsea Manning was a confirmed homosexual. Then they were wondering whether
Chelsea
or not
Manning. Okay, yeah.
And then they also wondered whether or not Julian Assange also might be gay.
Yeah. That was
the
inside joke.
Yeah,
that was the inside joke.
Hey, John, you mentioned it's an inside joke, but it really is an inside joke here at MormonLeaks, and we talk about it often because I am a confirmed homosexual.
Yes, well, I was getting there, Scott. Scott, I was getting there next. So, Scott Fausett, welcome also
Thank you.
to Mormon Stories. It's great to have you on for the first time.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Where are you dialing in from?
I'm dialing in from Dallas, Texas.
Dallas, Texas. All right. Go Cowboys.
Oh, no. Kansas City Chiefs.
Don't
Chiefs.
start this one here.
Okay, all right, go Chiefs. Go Chiefs. All right, so welcome to you both. Thanks to all the people who are joining us live. And so let's just begin. Now, Scott, I don't think people really associate your name as broadly with MormonLeaks as they do Ryan. But let me just ask, and we'll talk about that and if that's been hard or what that means. But let's just say that if we were going to go to the very beginning, would it be Ryan or Scott who sort of was the beginning impetus for this?
Absolutely, it was Ryan.
Okay, so yeah. Ryan, let's talk a bit about your story, and I'm going to pause you at some point, and then I'm going to kick over and have Scott talk about his story, and then we'll actually jump to the founding of MormonLeaks. But Ryan, let's back up and just talk to us about your kind of Mormon pedigree or non-pedigree, as it were.
Okay. Well, I was born into the church. On my dad's side of the family, goes back all the way to the pioneer days. I think the earliest ancestor that joined the church was during Brigham Young's time. And he was actually part of the group of people who came down and at Brigham Young's direction and settled what is now Las Vegas. For those that don't know, Las Vegas was actually settled originally by the Mormons. Now, he wasn't anybody like famous or anything. He was just part of the group of people. So on my dad's side, there's definitely a long, rich history of Mormons. I'm related to a guy named last name Levitt. I'm blanking on his first name right now, but people from Las Vegas or St. George know exactly who I'm talking about because almost everybody is related to him. He had like 50 wives or something like that. And he lived in southern Utah and southern Nevada area. And a lot of people down here are related to him. It's kind of a big joke here in Las Vegas to say that you're related to this guy, Levitt. But anyway, so my mom is a convert. She converted before she met my dad. And then, so I'm the oldest of 6 kids. And, I mean, I kind of grew up in a normal, typical LDS family. I moved around a lot and mostly lived in places that were not, with really very little to no LDS presence. So I was usually either the only one or one of a few Mormons, of my classmates. So that might be an experience that was different from most people that grew up in Utah. I was never surrounded by the Mormon machine, if you will.
Okay. Is it Dudley Levitt? Is that the name?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Dudley. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm related to one of his wives. I branched down from one of his wives.
Yeah. And my good friend Dave Christian is also a descendant of Dudley Levitt. And I'm sure Governor Levitt, Mike Levitt of Utah, is a descendant as well.
Yeah, I think he's pretty much, I think all the Levitts go back to him. And like I said, it's like a big inside joke here in Las Vegas when you meet somebody and everybody's related to this guy.
Right. So in terms of your Mormon experience growing up, did you go to church as a kid? Did you sing the primary songs? Did you go to seminary? Did you believe it? Were you into it or not?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely into it. We went to church every Sunday. We even made every effort to go to church on vacation. When we were on vacation, we would always try to find a word. So we were definitely very dedicated to going to church on Sunday. And for the most part, we followed all of the tenets of Mormonism. I mean, maybe we watched football on Sunday and, I know some Mormons don't do that, but, I would say that up till my mission, I would say that I was mostly 100% into it. I mean, obviously I had my moments of teen rebellion. But I wouldn't say that
you goofed off a little bit as a teen.
Yeah, but I don't think it was ever because I was doubting the church. It was just because of, dumb things teenagers do, right? So
And you said there were a few Mormons in your high school?
Yeah. I mean, especially in high school, I was almost always like the only one in my grade level, and there might have been a couple in the whole school. So I grew up in South and Central America from 6th grade until I graduated, and so I went to private schools.
Where?
I lived in Venezuela, Guatemala, Honduras. I was in Peru a little bit. I graduated high school.
Was your dad in the State Department?
Yeah, basically. My dad worked for the government, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is your Spanish super good?
Yeah. Well, I served my mission in Spain as well, and my wife is from Spain, and so I rarely, if ever, even speak English to my kids.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that at all.
Yeah, I know. Most people don't know. I recently, with my kids, as they get older and they start going to school, it's harder to get them to respond to us in Spanish because, they just want to respond in English. But we still make it a point to speak to them in Spanish just because we want to solidify that, bilingual abilities in them.
And again, your wife is from where?
She's from Spain. I met her on my mission.
Ah.
I'm one of those guys.
All right.
But she was a missionary. Now, she's from Spain, but she also served her mission in Spain, and we served in the same mission. Yeah.
Okay, so what was it like growing up as a gringo in Latin America in the church?
Well, wow, I've never, it's been a long time since I've thought about it. That's an interesting angle there. At church, so at school.
Was it always expat wards that you were in where it was always the white people from the corporations that?
Yes, but we didn't have our own ward, but we would all attend the same local ward no matter where we lived. Okay, so let's say Guatemala as an example. we're all the Americans that live there are spread around the city, but we all attended the same ward. And it was a ward that somebody chose. I have no idea who chose the ward, but it was like there was one ward that was designated to have all the Mormons in it. And it was like that in every country I lived in.
Isn't that called the expat ward, the expatriate ward?
But we weren't our own ward. That's the thing. Like, so we were just the Americans that were attending the local Guatemalan ward. And if there was ever a time where we had enough Americans, we might have our own Sunday school in English. But most of the time we were in their Sunday school in Spanish and everything. And we just happened to be sort of the Americans that were in there, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right.
Now that's in the 90s. So if it's changed since then, I don't know. But I never lived anywhere that had an actual ward for the Americans.
And those are pretty good schools you would go to in a Latin American country for expats, right?
Yeah, every country has at least one private school that caters to people like my dad or local wealthy businessmen that want their kids to get an American education.
Yeah.
So the school it's just like going to a private school in the United States. It's accredited by one of the bodies here in the United States, and it's just like going to school in the United States, but you're going to school with people from all around the world. I mean, when I was in 6th or 7th grade, and this was during the first Iraq war, and this was in Venezuela, one of my classmates was the daughter of the Iraqi ambassador. And
wow.
we were at war with her country, and I'm sitting next to her in class. So
those are
the kind of experiences that I got to grow up with being around people from all over the world.
That's a great experience.
With the church, though, I wanted to say, though, with church, that was with school, right? So with school, I was the weird Mormon, although most people didn't bother me about it. But at church, one of the interesting things that we had to deal with was all of the local members, they assumed that just because we were American, that we were like filthy rich. And that was not the case. I mean, my dad worked for the government, so he made, like a middle class income. But they just automatically assumed that we were millionaires. And it makes the relationship a little weird, to be perfectly honest with you. And but it was great experiences, and I had great friends there. And I had fun participating in all of the church activities there. And it's much like what you would experience here, maybe minus the Boy Scouts, because they don't do Boy Scouts there. I did Boy Scouts with just a regular troop that was not affiliated with the church.
So were your ward friends your closest friends?
No.
So your close friends were your school friends who weren't Mormon?
Definitely.
Did you go to ward? Were there ward dances and stake dances and youth activities?
Yeah, but I usually didn't go. I remember going to a couple, but yeah, it really wasn't my thing because I maybe this is part of like my youth rebellion. I kind of didn't make a huge effort to learn the language. I mean, you're there for so long, you kind of just learn it naturally, right? But I didn't like make the huge effort to try to learn it conversationally. And so when I was at church, I mean, my ability to communicate with people was somewhat limited.
Okay.
And I definitely favored hanging out with my friends from school that spoke English. And I kind of regret that now. I mean, I do. Yeah. I mean, having served my mission in Spain, everything, and having my wife from Spain has obviously erased any of that. But had I not served my mission in Spain, I probably would not speak Spanish as well as I would, because I kind of threw away that opportunity when I was there to really dominate the language.
Sure. Okay. Talk really quickly just about, did you go to early morning seminary, and how did your testimony get formed, if that makes sense?
Well, seminary for those countries. Now, I don't know how the locals did seminary, but the way the Americans did seminary there is we would have this, somebody who was in charge. So in Guatemala, where I was 11th and 12th grade, it was the wife of Lynn G. Robbins. People may know him he's in the first quorum of the president, or first quorum of the 70, or he actually might be in the presidency of the 70 now, I'm not sure. But he was the area president back then in that area, and they were obviously in our ward or whatever. He had kids that were my age. And his wife was the coordinator for seminary for the Americans. and we would go to their house once a week. I think we did it Sunday afternoons, and we would use the home study version of seminary. So we were supposed to like do all this work in this home study packet like during the week, and then on Sunday we would go to their house and like do the, you know, sort of review and go over what we learned and things like that. So it wasn't every day, and it wasn't early morning.
Yeah. So if somebody were to say, well, of course Ryan started MormonLeaks. He never got that traditional upbringing of
Oh, not
seminary
true.
and youth programs, and maybe
Yeah.
his testimony never got fully formed. How would you respond to that?
Well, it's definitely not true. I mean, I would say that up until my mission, or right before a mission, like many teenagers, I was probably relying heavily on my parents' testimony. So I wasn't necessarily like, you know, sharing Book of Mormons with all of my non-member classmates, and I wasn't that guy. I wasn't like getting up and bearing tearful testimony when I was a teenager, but I had zero doubt the church was true. I bought in hook, line, and sinker to everything I was taught. And in fact, one of the reinforcements for my testimony, and this was one of the biggest things that kept me going for as long as I did, is growing up in those countries, you come across all of this uh, tour groups and all of these stories about, you know, the Book of Mormon having occurred in Central America, even more so than when you're here. It's really part of the narrative down there.
It is.
And,
It is.
and and I love the Mayan culture, and we would visit regularly the different Mayan sites. And I bought in 100% hook, line, and sinker the idea that I was living in the land of the Book of Mormon. And there was even one guy, I believe his last name was Allen. He might even be dead now because he was an old guy back then. But he ran one of the biggest Book of Mormon tours where he would bring Americans, and he wrote a book and everything, which I had. And the last stop for his tour, when they were doing their tour, was our church on the Sunday right before their plane would go back to the States, and they would come to sacrament meeting. And so every couple of months, this bus full of Americans would come in, and we got to meet all these people, and it was just so cool to hear about everything they went and saw on their trip. And like I said, I bought into it. I mean, there's a place in Guatemala called Lake Atitlan,
Yeah.
and my family went there twice on vacation.
It's the
And
waters
this,
of Mormon. It's the waters of
well,
Mormon.
yeah, and not only that, there's like this urban legend that gets told. Who knows where it started, but it's among the people that talk about the Book of Mormon happening there. That one time in modern history, there was like some earthquake, and the waters at Lake Atitlan receded briefly because of the earthquake, and it revealed like this sunken city in the middle, and then of course the waters went back up, and then there's this whole thing where they say that there's 12 volcanoes around the lake, and I'm not sure if that's exactly how many there are, but there are a lot of volcanoes that surround the lake, and they say that those rose during when Christ was killed and during all that land destruction, and that they represent the 12 apostles. I mean, these are the type of stories that get told, and I remember going to Lake Atitlan and just feeling that connection super strong, that I was walking where the Nephites and the Lamanites walked. And yeah, but again, I wouldn't say that I wasn't getting up bearing like tearful testimony. Right before my mission, I was in Peru. Yeah, I was in Peru, and my parents had just moved to Peru after I graduated high school. So I was there waiting for my mission call to come, and um, I mean, long story short, I mean, I wanted to go, but I didn't want to go. I mean, I was feeling a lot of pressure to go. And it wasn't that I didn't believe. It was more like I wanted to go to college and I wanted to like start a job kind of a thing. Um, and when I was there, the mission president for one of the Lima missions, I don't remember which one it is, but he was in our ward, and he came and said, "Oh, hey, I hear you're just hanging out waiting for your mission. You want to go and do a mini mission?" I don't know if that's like an official term, but that's what he called it. And I said, "Okay, sure." And what I found out later is they had sent somebody home, and so they were like short a missionary until the next transfer. So I basically went. I was set apart as a missionary. I received a name tag. I received like a monthly stipend. I went out into the sticks in Lima, like outskirts of Lima. I had a companion. I didn't call my parents. I was like living a missionary. And one of the first visits we did was with this guy that was about to get baptized. And I remember like this was really like my first experience with missionaries. I hadn't done a lot of like splits before, and I remember that the room was just filled with that spirit feeling that you get, and the spirit was super strong in this discussion. And from that moment forward, I was 100% sold. I was super excited for my mission. It was like a literal turning point for me that day. And and then when I went to my mission in Barcelona, it just grew and grew and grew. And by the time I was done, I mean, I was all in, no doubts that the church was true. I had seen many miracles on my mission that I could hearken back to. And I had a great mission I had a great mission experience. I didn't have one of those experiences where I had like an abusive mission president, really, that you sometimes hear about online. So by the time I finished my mission, I was, all in.
And how far did that all in true believing Mormon sort of phase go past your mission?
Pretty much till I was 32. I mean,
where'd you go to college?
UNLV. I have 2 degrees from UNLV.
Okay, so you're a rebel, but you were a true believer. You were a true believer. Did you do Institute at UNLV?
No, I went to college a little later, so I didn't go right after my mission. I was married with kids already by the time I went to school, I was married with kids.
Married in the temple?
Yes, Las Vegas temple.
And you guys were true believers, Orthodox?
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
I wasn't the guy that you would look at and say, oh, he's a future bishop, but I've never been that guy. Like I was just a stalwart, everyday member. I mean, I had my flaws and everything, but I've never committed any like serious sin, that would get me like disfellowshipped or excommunicated or anything. I've never done anything like that. I've just lived a normal life. I had the different callings that I had. We were in primary for like the first 2 years we were married. Then I was I think the next one I was Sunday school president. Then I was the ward mission leader. Then I was my favorite calling of all the callings I had, and I had it for like 5 years. I was an instructor in elders quorum. That was my favorite calling because I like to get up and talk to people, and it wasn't really demanding outside of Sunday, which was good too because I was really busy outside of Sunday. And
as an Orthodox believer, did you ever flirt with, progressive stuff or liberal stuff or anti-Mormon stuff, or did you just stay away from it?
Stayed away from it. And it wasn't like a conscious effort to stay away from it. I was like, I had total blinders on. And I look back now and I can think of things that people would say to me that I completely just sort of went in one ear and out the other. And I just completely dismissed that maybe had I stopped for a moment and thought about it. Like one time this guy and I were talking in the cultural hall, and he was like really into like studying all out about the church or whatever. And he mentioned this book called Rough Stone Rolling. And I had like vaguely heard of the book, but I mean, I had never had no intention of reading it. And he said something about how he loved the book, but it was hard for him to read because there were things in it that bothered him. And at the time, like, I didn't even bat an eye when he said, like, I didn't even be like, I wasn't even like, well, what was it that bothered you? Like, it didn't even, I don't know, the blinders in that sense were so tight. And it's unfortunate because I've always been like a skeptic and a critical thinker my whole life. But when I would walk through the doors of the church, it was like a light switch that would just flip off when it came to critical thinking. And I didn't even, engage in any discussions like that. So I look back now and I could maybe see some things that slightly bothered me that maybe were shelf items, but I didn't even really know what a shelf was. So I would not have told you, I would not have told you at the time that this was bothering me. It was just like little things that bothered me, and I got over it really quick. And now looking back to it, I realized it was probably a shelf item.
Got it. All right. That's a fascinating introduction to your story, Ryan. Let me pause for a second and check in with our listeners. Kimberly's joined us. Steve's joined us. We've got 84 people joining us live on Facebook Live, another 23. So we're over 100 people, which is always fun.
Cool.
Kimberly says hi, Steve. Let's see. Eric is asking if either you or Scott have a Julian Assange tattoo. I think that Eric's trying to be funny.
Yeah.
Heather wants to know if you're wearing a Make America Great Again hat,
No.
Ryan. Is that what you're wearing?
I'm
What
a
is it?
proud. I'm a
Put it
proud.
closer. Put it closer. UNLV.
You
Okay, it's a Rebel baseball
I'm a
cap.
proud
Okay.
alumni. I
Okay.
bleed red, and
Okay.
even when I was a believing Mormon, I was never a fan of BYU sports.
Right.
Go
Yeah. Yeah.
go
Yeah.
Rebels.
Yeah. I remember UNLV from my days growing up with Jerry Tarkanian and the Running Rebels in the 80s. That was fun. Scott, I'm assuming your cap is a Kansas City Chiefs hat. Is that right?
Absolutely.
All right. All right. We'll get to you in just one second. So Mikey writes that Brother Allen was on a couples mission when he was in Bilbao, Spain from 94 to 96.
Cool.
So Omar joins us from Edmonton. All right, so we've got some great participation. Ryan, I love your story so far. I wouldn't have guessed some of that. So you were more orthodox and sort of closed-minded than I would have pegged you for a longer amount of time than I would have pegged you,
and
knowing what you've done. Yeah,
yeah, and it was really due to a lack of opening my mind to other ideas, because it would not have been hard to convince me that there were issues with the church. Like when I finally did start to find these things out, it was a relatively quick turnaround. It's just that I just didn't know, and even like I actually probably started changing politically a little bit before I changed religiously, actually.
Yeah,
and that may have helped prepare me for the ability to entertain the idea that there were problems with the church.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, Ryan. It's been great so far. Scott, let's switch over to you since we're interviewing both of you. Scott, why don't you go through the same questions? What's your Mormon pedigree, your cred? Okay. Tell us about your Mormon cred.
Just kind of a little bit of background. I grew up on a very small community of 120 people, all Mormon. And I was very active in the church.
Where?
Out by Roosevelt, Bluebell, Utah.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, very, very small community. Very active in the church. Eagle Scout. I was an assistant scoutmaster. Went through, the Deacons Quorum President, Teachers Quorum, Priest Quorum, things like that. I attended the World Scout Jamboree in Australia when I was a senior in high school. And as a teenager, I was actually disfellowshipped for some time.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, I was given a priesthood blessing from my bishop and stake president that said if I would go on a mission, get married in the temple, have kids, I would be cured of my homosexual feelings. And that's what I did.
Are you comfortable talking about that disfellowship at all? Okay, so
absolutely.
Talk, if you don't mind. I'm not trying to. Okay, so first, you were raised very Orthodox, right? Both your
very
parents,
much, absolutely, my entire family,
parents, pioneer ancestry, and all that.
Yes.
And you were of how many kids? You were
8 siblings, 8 of us.
Oh, wow. How young are you? Where are you in the order?
I'm number 5 of 8, and my parents had 12 foster children as well.
Holy moly. How many older brothers?
I have 3 older brothers.
There's actually a biological association between the more older brothers you have and the probability that you will be gay. That's just something that people don't know. And so I just want to call that out.
It is interesting. The third male of a womb typically will be gay.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know that, but I did know that the more older brothers you have, the higher the probability you'll be gay, according to science. So talk about, so you were devout growing up, super believing. When did you first start feeling that you might be gay?
Probably about age 5.
Oh, wow. That's early.
I dealt with it my entire life. Never seriously dated girls. I did take a girl to junior prom, but never dated any in high school. And so, as I said, I was disfellowshipped as a teenager for about 6 months. And it was one of those things where...
Was that because you started dating boys or what?
Because of things that I was doing with other boys my age, absolutely.
Okay, so and this isn't me trying to get like scandalous details. It's more trying to understand your story. No, so like I guess normally it's puberty around 13 when a gay kid just starts like really feeling those attractions strongly. Was that the case for you or not?
It was.
Okay. And so by what age were you actually starting to have, you know, intimate connections with boys? Like how did that happen when you're devout Mormon?
Probably
Like,
about 12, 13. It actually started when I was staff at a scout camp,
yeah.
to be honest.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Because that's where a lot of boys are.
Yep.
Okay. And so it starts at scouting. And at the time, how as a 13-year-old, are you balancing your Orthodox beliefs with starting to be romantically intimate with boys? What's
It
going
was
on in your brain?
very difficult because the whole time growing up, we were hearing, Spencer W. Kimball's book and all these talks about how wrong it is and how evil and it's not of God. And so you're very conflicted of, I know who I am, but the church who I believe in and that my family believes in, that I'm very devout, they say that this is wrong and that I'm, something's wrong with me. And so it's very, very conflicting the whole time growing up. And that's why when I was disfellowshipped and told that if I went on a mission and got married in the temple and had kids, that I'd be cured, myself as well as other people my age, that's what we did because that's what we wanted to do. And we certainly weren't going to come out to our families, especially growing up in a cowboy community. It wouldn't have been the smartest thing to do. And so
Was your
difficult.
bishop kind to you? Was he loving? Was he understanding? Did you feel shame? Did you feel, how was that?
He was very loving as a bishop can be, telling you that you're wrong, and that the way you feel is a sin and of the devil. So yeah, as loving as someone can be. But he was very loving, and it was more or less of, this is like a disease, or this is just something that's going on that you'll be cured of. And about
So,
that same time, that's when people my age were sent to BYU for the aversion therapy, shock therapy programs.
in the 70s.
It was, yep,
Okay.
70s.
So, what did that do to you? Did you then internalize the shame? Did you think these guys are nuts? I'm just going to hold on as long as I can, but I'm okay with who I am? Or did you internalize the shame and hope that you could be changed at some point?
For a while, I internalized the shame. I really thought that, I wanted to believe the church. I wanted to believe that this is what, the priesthood blessing has told me, that I'll be cured of this. And so I towed the line. I was very active. I went on a mission. I got married. I had kids.
Wait, real quick. After you were disfellowshipped, did you stop cold turkey?
For a while, yes. Then I, went on a mission, got myself ready to go on a mission, which honestly was surprising. That the church let me go on a mission. And I wonder now if it was more because it was a smaller community, if it was more out of not being an embarrassment to the community that, one member who supposedly was so active to people didn't go on a mission. So I wonder if that's more what it is. Or if they really thought you could be cured.
Do you think all the ward members and your parents and your family, that everyone knew that you were gay?
Nope.
Oh, they didn't know?
They did not. When I finally came out, everyone was shocked.
Okay, so you told the bishop. Did you say, Bishop, I'm gay, or just Bishop, I had these experiences?
Well, I didn't tell him either. I got called in
to
the bishop's office because someone, another young man who was trying to get ready to go on a mission, I guess had gone into the bishop and confessed. And so I got called into the bishop's office.
Sure. Okay. And so was the conversation with the bishop about being gay or just about the behavior?
It was strictly about the behavior.
Okay.
That's all they wanted to hear.
Okay. So you got disfellowshipped. Did your parents know you were disfellowshipped?
They did.
Did they know why?
To my knowledge, no.
Wow. So it was never discussed why you were disfellowshipped.
Correct.
They never said what's going on, Scott? Why are you disfellowshipped?
Nope. I'm assuming at that time they thought it was because I was doing things inappropriate with young.
women?
Yep, yep.
Holy moly! So your community and your family never found out.
They never found out for about another 20 years.
Oh my, 20 years! Holy
Yep.
moly! How could families? I mean, I can see how families wouldn't talk about it, but I can't understand how. If I were a parent and my kid got disfellowshipped, I would want to find out what's going on. Mm.
Yeah, it was never discussed.
Okay, so on your mission, were you ever tempted? Did you?
Interestingly enough, I was not on my mission. And what's interesting about that is, after my mission, we find out there's probably about 12 of us from my mission in Norway who are confirmed homosexuals.
Uh-huh. Oh, from
So
your mission
from my
during the
mission,
2 years that you were there.
correct.
Wow. Okay. But you're saying on your mission you did or did not have.
Did not.
Okay, so was that hard? Did you feel attracted to your companions?
Actually, I think because I was trying so hard to live what the church told me and to be cured of this, I really, really, really wanted to give it a concerted effort because I hated the conflict. It was pure hell. The feelings that I was having of feeling that I was wrong and of the devil, and I just wanted to get rid of that. It was very heavy.
Hmm.
And so, I did what I was told to do.
Did you feel like you had a deep, sincere testimony of the church?
I did.
And did you plead with God in prayer to take it away?
Many times. Many times.
What was that like? What did that do to you to pray to God to take it away?
It was very hard for me because, just knowing deep down that, I'm not making this up, that this isn't a choice. This is how I've felt, from very, very young. But then to hear your church leader say that it's a choice and that this is what you choose to do, and it's because of something in your life that you've done, it's very difficult. And so it was very conflicting. And, honestly, that's why so many gay people have taken their lives in the church. And that's a whole nother topic.
Can you relate to feeling that low? And if so,
absolutely.
What specifically makes you feel like that's an option or that's desirable? Tell us just directly what makes a gay Mormon feel like they want to commit suicide.
I think it's because your family, everything that you grew up, I raised my children in the church. Your whole family, your whole life, especially in Utah, revolves around the church. The people you go to work with, the people you see at the grocery store, the people, your neighbors. You can't even talk to a neighbor without having it be some kind of church activity or church discussion. And you get to a point that you just want the pain to go away. You want the living hell that you're living through to go away. And you struggle because you have a testimony, you had a testimony, and you taught this on your mission. And you see a lot of the good that the church does, but they are just totally destroying you. And you just want it to end because you get to the point that you believe that you are of the devil, that something is wrong with you. And you just want the pain to go away.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing something so personal, Scott. I'm super glad you didn't take your life, by the way. As a psychologist, I know that it's not healthy and sustainable to feel that pain for so long. Did you find ways to self-medicate that pain away?
Actually, the way I did it was just to be more involved in the church, to be, active. And I after my mission, I was the young men's president. I was in the elders quorum presidency. I was state clerk for 7 years, which then I was disfellowshipped for a year while I was a state clerk for the same thing. And then I was put into the Stake Young Men's presidency, and then as a ward clerk. And the way you self-medicate is just to involve yourself as much as you can with the church. And I got to the point when I was a state clerk, sitting through disciplinary councils. And, I was also a temple worker. And ironically, after my mission, I was called on an 18-month church service mission to translate for the first presidency. I was very, very involved in the church.
What? Translate what?
I translated the Scandinavian languages. A lot of them were disciplinary councils from English to the Scandinavian languages and back. But I translated for the first presidency, and I got to the point that I couldn't live the double life anymore. It was killing me. It literally was killing me. And I got to the point that I said to myself, if I don't do something, I will end up dead.
And you were married and you what?
I was married in the temple, and I had kids, and I
How many kids?
Anymore.
How many
I
kids?
have 3 children.
Did your wife know you were gay when you married her?
Yes.
And she was willing to do that?
She was, because I would be cured.
She believed that too?
Yep.
That's its whole podcast right there, brother. So how old were you when you reached that breaking point?
Interestingly enough, it was when I was the state clerk, so I was probably 30, and we stayed married for 7 more years after that.
Wow.
We divorced for other reasons, and then once I was divorced, that's when I decided that I would live my life authentically, and I would live my life as a gay person. And, for the record, I still am a member of the church. I've been involved in organizing some of the mass resignations and involved there, but I still am a member of the church. And my children are still members.
How old are you now?
I'm 46.
Okay, so you're younger than me. So you've been living as an authentic gay man for what, 9 years?
Correct.
Okay. I just want to pause for a second. In response to your story, Jen writes, incredible. Kimberly writes, Scott, you are amazing and perfect and much loved by me and many, many others. Tracy sends lots of hearts. There's just a lot of people. Julie writes, Scott, thank you for sharing your story. Your story is so touching and so important. And I just want to reflect that. I think you really hit a chord with our audience. So thank you.
Thanks, John. And here's the thing. This isn't my story. This is the story of thousands and thousands and thousands of current members of the church, of former members of the church, and the story of people who don't dare come out, who don't have the courage, some who have taken their lives. And this is their story. I'm just one who's willing to be vocal about it. But we all have family, we all have neighbors, we all have friends who this is their story. We just don't know it. The November 2015 policy was very, very difficult for me. And many people would maybe remember that I went on the local news stations and spoke about that. How the church...
In Dallas?
No, in Salt Lake.
Oh, okay.
I've just recently... I'm engaged to a man. I'm getting married this year.
Congratulations.
We'll live in Dallas. Thank you. As a matter of fact, we got engaged at Arrowhead Stadium during the Kansas City Chiefs playoff game. So, but the November 2015 policy really affected me. And I went on the news and I said, look, me as a teenager, I was basically commanded by the church, my church leaders, to go on a mission, get married in the temple, have kids. And now the kids that the church commanded me to have are being used as pawns against me. They had nothing to do with this. The children of gay parents had absolutely nothing to do with. They had no choice in this matter. And the church is punishing them because something I did. If the church doesn't want me as a gay man in their church, I'm okay with that. I'm an adult. I made the choice not to be gay, but I did make the choice to live my life as a gay man. openly, but my kids had nothing to do with this, and they're the ones being punished.
Yeah. All right, Scott. Thank you for sharing your story. And we've got a lot more to talk about, but I think that gives us a really good sense for kind of your early years and what context kind of took you to the point of wanting to be involved in MormonLeaks. So we're going to come back to several things you've talked about. One of our listeners asked for clarification, asking if you said shock therapy, and indeed, yes. At BYU, this is Morgan's question, and yes, at BYU, electroshock aversion therapy was used in the 70s to try and apply behavioral conditioning practices to gay people to try and take that away. So yes, that did happen at BYU. Danae and others were questioning that. Okay, so Ryan, let's come back to you. I want to thank our listeners for comments and questions. So Ryan, when and how did things unravel for you?
So when in 2013, well, actually in 2010 or 11, I don't recall exactly what year, my sister, the one just below me, born after me, she got married to a returned missionary, not in the temple. And it was kind of known that they didn't go to church, but it was never really talked about as to the reasons why. It was kind of one of those like don't ask, don't tell situations. They got married by the bishop in his backyard in Utah, and they weren't vocal about the fact that they didn't go to church, and it's just not their personality. And it was kind of assumed because my brother-in-law's like a really smart guy. Like he has a PhD in, some science, something that makes my head hurt. So it was kind of like the assumption was, oh, he's like too smart for his own good or some stupid thing like that, But that wasn't based on anything he ever said. So my wife was pretty close to my sister and would occasionally talk to her on the phone, and the conversation of sort of going back to church would sometimes come up, almost like in a member missionary type way. And, nothing ever really, my sister would just be very politely somehow tell her that, she's not going to go back to church now. And my wife would like hear through the grapevine of like my family and her, I was never really part of these conversations, that it had something to do with polygamy was the reason why they didn't go to church anymore. And I didn't even know if this was like true or if it was just a rumor or what. And I would tell my wife, like my wife would ask me about it because we knew like the whitewash version of polygamy, and neither my wife or I really saw it as a legitimate reason to leave the church. And I would like brush it off and tell my wife that it was just an excuse they were using, if that was even the real reason. And then one day, after my wife had mentioned this to me again, this would have been in sometime in mid-June of 2013. I'm like, why would somebody leave the church over some ridiculous thing like polygamy? So I said, well, let me just try to understand the other side. Maybe my wife, if she understands the other side, maybe she can say something or something like that would, maybe have an effect. So I do some Google search about polygamy. I don't remember exactly what I put in. And one of the first things I came across was that Joseph Smith had married teenagers. Now, I knew he was a polygamist, Joseph Smith. I know a lot of members for a long time didn't even know that. They thought polygamy started with Brigham Young. But I did know that Joseph Smith was a polygamist. But I had no idea about, teenage brides. And when I read this, I thought, well, he must have read this lie on the internet because there's no way this is true. I 100% did not believe it. And of course, as I'm reading this website, I think it might have been Mormon Think, but I'm not sure of the first website I went to. I don't remember. And there was like a link to, like source documentation on this. And then all of a sudden I find, like Fair Mormon, which I had never even heard of before. And all of a sudden I'm seeing that these things are confirmed with a twist, with a spin, but confirmed. And for me, it was like, even though the idea of teenage brides was bothering me, it was more an issue of the cover up being worse than the crime. And I was like, man, if I was wrong about this, because I was sure it wasn't true. I was like, if I was wrong about this, what else am I wrong about? And of course, the rabbit hole opens wide up and I start to go down. So I'm like studying this, I'm reading online, I'm like devouring everything that I can find. One of the very first like anti-Mormon things I allowed myself to view, like purposefully, I didn't stumble across it. I actually purposely said, I'm going to watch this, was actually one of your interviews.
Hey, you
And
can't call that anti-Mormon.
Well, I was going to say, I don't want to, I know that I don't think it's anti-Mormon, but at the time I did. Okay. So I'm just being honest with you.
I totally get it. I'm just kidding. I'm totally.
Yeah. But it was the interview that you did with John and Brooke McClay.
Yeah.
And like, I knew nothing about you. I'd never even heard of you before. I didn't even know that this was part of a wider library of interviews. I had no idea. I just stumbled across this interview. And I was captivated by their story because I heard so much of myself in John's voice. Even though we had very different lives, there was still something about his belief and his surprise, when learning things, and his seeking answers to no avail, that just really connected with me. And I said, man, maybe there's something to this. And then I find the CES letter, which at the time really hadn't even gone viral yet. It really wasn't known outside of Reddit at the time. A little bit, but it wasn't what it is today. I think it had just been written in April of 2013, and this is like late June 2013 that I'm finding the CS letter. And the CS letter for me, what it did was, because I had already read like Mormon Think and I had already watched several of your interviews, what the CS letter did was it took all of this information that I'd been reading all over the place, and it packaged it up in a really organized, easy to read format that sort of tied it all together. And I said, oh my goodness, this is what I've been reading. And I wasn't to the point yet where I didn't believe. I was at a stage where I was definitely having massive doubts, but I was still convinced that, well, I didn't doubt the truthfulness of any of this information. So I didn't think like the CS letter was full of lies or anything, but I was convinced that there was an explanation out there that I just hadn't found yet, that would make it all make sense. So I'm seeking this explanation, and it's consuming me, right? And I'm not telling my wife about this because I was pretty sure, especially because I'm reading on all these stories about how this ends up in divorce. I was pretty sure that my wife was going to have one of those negative reactions that I was reading about, because my wife was always, if there was a spiritual anchor in our household, it was my wife. And and I also, my 10-year anniversary was coming up, and I had like this whole big thing planned that I had started planning before I even found any of this stuff, and I didn't want to like ruin our 10-year anniversary. And then also we had just signed a contract on a house that we were building, and I'm like taking everything to like these crazy conclusions. Like, okay, if I get divorced, I don't want to lose this house. Like, I really want to get the house, so maybe I should wait to tell her until after we're in the house, because I can keep the house or something. Or I'm going through all these crazy scenarios in my mind, right? So we go on our 10-year anniversary date, and I act like everything's normal. We had a great time. And now I'm like, okay, that's over. Now, okay, am I going to wait till we get into the house and do like a slow fade that I keep reading about online, whatever? And like a week after our anniversary, we were at church, sacrament meeting ended. We were in the overflow. Everybody clears out to go to their classes. We ended up by ourselves in the overflow talking about something that had nothing to do with any of this. I don't remember what we were talking about. We were talking about something, and there was like a pause in the conversation, like a natural pause. And I was looking at her, and I was like overcome with this feeling, the spirit, if you want to call it that. But it was that type of a feeling that I could not continue living this lie. Because, even though just like everybody's told lies in their life, like I'm not the kind of person that can really like lead a double life. Like it's just not part of my personality. And so I couldn't do this. Is, we're 3-4 weeks into this, and I just couldn't do it anymore. So I said, I got to tell you something. I think the church might not be true. It was just rip the Band-Aid off. And she started crying immediately. And I said, I want to talk about this. We've got to talk about this. And I didn't have my computer with me. I didn't even have a smartphone at the time. So, I couldn't show her anything. I said, when we get home, I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. But, for the rest of the block, the two hours that were left, we went out and sat on the couch and talked about this. And I was telling her about this stuff. We went home. I show her things. Now, here's where I got lucky. Never once in this process was divorce ever even part of the conversation. So it was never even on the table. So in that sense, I got super lucky. And she wanted to read. You always hear these stories about how the spouse, they don't even want to know about it. La, 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 la. My wife wanted to know. So I got lucky in that sense too. And she also was not disputing any of these things. Like, she could see that, okay, all of these issues, they seem to be legit. But she was still holding on to her testimony for several reasons. And basically it was heavily on the feeling now as opposed to the thoughts, because intellectually she's seeing that there's these issues, but she's still feeling the Spirit. So she's not having the same level of doubts that I'm having. And so we don't know what to do. We don't want to tell anybody in our ward. We've been in this particular ward for like 8 years. And, my oldest daughter had just been baptized right before all this went down. And we just didn't know how to handle this whole situation. So we reached out to my mission president, who was at the time and still is in the First Corps of the 70. And he's a good guy. And I, until proven otherwise, I'm going to still count him as one of the good guys and hope that he's, a victim of all of this lie as much as I was. But
remind us of his name.
His name is Shane Bowen.
Okay. Bowen.
Yeah.
Okay.
I normally actually don't say his name, but I figure, there's no reason to keep it a secret. His name is Shane Bowen. He's a good guy. I have nothing bad to say about him. And I'll tell you what happened with him. We reached out to him through his wife, who we were friends with on Facebook, and he was gracious enough to spend 2 hours with us on Skype. Now, right before this happened,
around what year would this have been? Around what year?
This would have been like late August of 2013. So I'm like 2 months into my investigation here, and I'm like my testimony is hanging by a thread.
Got it.
And I need him to save me. I need him to give me this explanation of what am I missing. Now, like a week or two prior to that, we did finally go to my bishop, and we went together. And I said to him, Bishop, and I was in the young men's presidency at the time, although I was about to be released because we were like a week or two away from moving to our new house in a new state. So I was going to be released anyway. But I said to him, to the bishop, this is before talking to the mission president, and I said to him, I've come across some information online, and and as soon as I said that, he like clams up. He goes, oh, well, he didn't want to hear anything I had to say. He goes, Ryan, you need to repent. You need to refocus. You're obviously not reading your scriptures. You need to turn the computer off. And he like didn't even want to hear even one of the issues. Like I couldn't even get out like one of my issues. All he heard was internet, and he shut down. So that was no good. And after that, we were like, said to my wife, I said, well, we're just not going to talk about this until we move to the new ward, because the people in this ward are not going to be able to deal with this. So then 2 weeks later or so, we finally sit down, and now we're like a week away from moving into our new house. But I would sit down with the mission president on Skype, and we catch up. We hadn't talked in a long time.
And he was the general authority at the time you talked to him, right?
I think he was called like in 2006 into the First Corps of the 70, roughly, and he's still there. Okay. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he's currently the area president for the Philippines.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. And he's spoken several times in General Conference, and
Bowen.
Right? Shane Bowen. And my oldest son, who's my third child, is actually named after him. and his name is Shane. So we don't regret that even to this day. He's a good man. So we sit down, and I had sent him prior to this, I had sent him sort of like my own CES letter, if you will. I mean, it wasn't as comprehensive as a CS letter, but it was like 20 pages of like the major questions that I had and like some citations, like some sources where I was getting the information from. So I sent him that previous, and he said that he read it, and I'll take his word for that. But we went through each one, and he never interrupted me. Like, he never cut me off. He was respectful the whole time. He would have a few like replies about how, oh yeah, I've heard of that. I'm aware of that. There was like one or two things, and I don't remember what they were, that he like was new to him. But for the most part, he said he knew about all of these issues. And we get to the end, and well, first of all, before I tell you what his final thoughts were, he did mention, now this is summer of 2013. First essay came out in like December 2015 or 2013 of that year, right? First essay came out December of 2013, I think. So a couple months later, he told me that the church was about to publish some essays that were going to help me. So he obviously was in the loop on that. And I've since found out he serves on the executive committee for Correlation. So he's involved in these things. But anyway, in the end, he says, you know, you've done some great research. I can't dispute anything you said. As far as I know, everything you said is accurate. And he says, there's really no answer that's, at least like, there's no answer that you're looking for. He said, the only answer that exists is the answer that you're going to get through the Holy Ghost, telling you that the church is true. And I said to him, I said, look, President, I can understand where you're coming from, but this is not going to work for me anymore. And I pulled out my scriptures, and there was something in the Bible dictionary that I had heard at church like a couple weeks prior. And it was in the definition of faith, and it's the second paragraph. And I'm going to paraphrase. Everybody can go look it up to get the exact words. But it says something to the effect of true faith, perfect faith requires correct knowledge, something like this. And I said, that doesn't mean you have to know everything, but what it means is that your faith, in order for it to be true and perfect, has to be based on correct knowledge to the extent that we can have correct knowledge. And I said, up until this point, my faith has been based on lies. And it doesn't work anymore. I cannot rely on faith anymore like I was previous. All of these spiritual experiences that I had, that I do not deny to this day, that I could tell you about them to this day, that were pillars of my testimony. I do not deny those, but I just see them differently now. And I cannot rely on them anymore. So I tell him that, you know, he's basically says, you know, we love you guys. He was my wife's mission president as well, so keep that in mind. You know, we love you guys, and you know, we're going to pray for you, and this and that. And you know, it all ended friendly. But when that phone call ended, I said to my wife, I said, this might be it, because I didn't necessarily expect him to have an answer, you know, in the spur of the moment, but I expected him to say, you know, I know there's an answer here. Let me get back to you in a couple of days. But he didn't even say that. Like, he definitively said, you're right about all these issues. They're valid issues, but you got to rely on faith. You know, this was his line. And I just, you know, and it bothered my wife as well. Now, my wife is still proceeding as a believer in spite of it, but it bothered her as well. She was pretty confident that we were going to get some answers from him. And so what I did was
really quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Steve Holbrook writes, first essays were November 2013. Adam writes, he loves your integrity. Teresa really liked that statement, faith based on lies. And Cameron wrote, perfect faith requires correct knowledge. That is really profound. We can't be afraid of knowledge. So I just wanted to confirm that I had a personal conversation with Marlon Jensen about all these issues, and he admitted to me that the church decided somewhere in 2012, I think it must have been in reaction to the Swedish rescue and Marlon's many attempts to field calls and questions about these issues. Marlon Jensen told me, we've pretty much determined that once someone goes down the rabbit hole, you can't ever get them back. and that's why I don't think the essays were written with a sincere attempt to resolve questions, because I think they knew that wouldn't actually achieve anything. I think that the changes made with CES, with the church curriculum, with the essays were meant to get rid of that original concern you had, which is feeling betrayed over trying to actually resolve the issues, and saying if we can bake minimal, heavily contextualized exposure to these issues and inoculate people in their youth and in their adulthood, then we have plausible deniability that we actually kept these things from people. But we're not going to do a sincere effort at educating and addressing the issues. Anyway, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. And I think the essays can work to possibly prevent some people from even going down the rabbit hole. It's like they look at the essays and they satisfy their initial needs, and the rabbit hole is shut, and they kind of stop there.
Summer writes, the essays were meant to Animal Farm the members. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Really quick, Lawana writes, how do you reconcile your spiritual experiences now? You just do briefly, because we don't have time to go too much.
Yeah, I mean, they're just life experiences that we all have, no matter what background we come from, what religion we come from. We all have powerful interpersonal experiences with people where we are overcome with strong emotions. And that's what happened. I was overcome in situations, in personal interactions with people, and I was overcome with a strong emotional connection. And I thought it was God or the Holy Ghost touching me, and really it was just a natural thing that happens to everybody, pure and simple.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Go ahead.
So tell us where you're going next.
Well, I just really quick, sort of completing sort of me leaving the church. So we said after this conversation with the mission president, we're like days away from moving. So I still wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do, but I was pretty sure I was going to at least take a break from church. So I said, okay, when we go to this new ward that's in a new state, and I said, I'll go to church with you. I'm telling my wife this. And I'll go to sacrament meeting, and then I'll watch the boys in the hallway, because my two youngest were not even nursery age yet. And I'll watch them in the hallway. You go to your classes. I said, I'm not going to talk to people about the church, but if anybody asks me, I am not a member anymore. That's the way I'm going to approach it. So this worked for like 3 weeks. And like the third or fourth weekend, somebody, I don't remember if it was like testimony or if it was just a talk, but some guy's up talking about Joseph Smith. And he starts talking about how Joseph Smith is one of the purest, most honest, best, every superlative in the book, person to ever live. And for the first time in my life, I had like this panic attack. I started shaking. Hang on one second. Hey boys, you guys need to go outside, okay? Sorry guys, I know this is live. Hey, what do you need?
It's the little McKnights. It's good. Okay, Ryan,
go downstairs.
I'll mute you for a second.
No, it's good. They're gone.
Okay.
So I told my wife after, I said, I can't do this anymore. And I said, I'll stay home with the boys if you want. I'll have the house cleaned and food ready when you come home. And she was fine. She understood, because it was bothering her too. Not as much as me, but it was bothering her too. So she understood. And so I stopped going to church. The elders quorum president and the bishop came over a couple of times, but I was like, hey, if you guys want to come and do your home teaching with my wife, that's fine. I said, but I'm not a member. And they would do these like vague attempts to like explore why I left the church. But as soon as we got into the meat of it, you could tell they didn't want to talk about it. And they stopped coming after like a couple of months. And then my wife and I were, I was in this angry, bitter mode that we all go through. And I'm like really wanting my wife to open her eyes. And it was causing like all these arguments, because I was trying to like force this on her. And so finally we both took a step back, and we said, okay, I said, we won't talk about the church anymore. You do what you want to do. You want to go to church, you go to church. And she said, you don't want to go to church, you don't want to go to church. She's not going to bother me, I'm not going to bother her. And eventually that actually was the best thing that ever happened, because she ended up studying herself out like 6 months later. And now she doesn't believe at all anymore either. But that all led to me getting involved on Reddit, which we don't have to talk about it right now if you don't want to. But Reddit ended up being a place where I could go and just pour my mind out, my heart, my soul, like the stuff that I had nobody to talk to about. Like I could just put it out there and not have like harsh judgments and get people's feedback and people who are going through the same thing. And that's how I got involved in Reddit. And Reddit played a huge part in me getting past my bitter stage.
So you're talking about the ex-Mormon Reddit subreddit, right?
Yes,
On Reddit.
Yes.
And for the listeners who don't know, you just go to Reddit, REDDIT.com, right? And then if you search for ex-Mormon, right?
Yeah.
You'll find the subreddit, which is reddit.com/r/ex-Mormon, right?
The easiest thing to do is to just Google ex-Mormon Reddit, and it'll be the first result.
Yeah.
That would be the easiest way to find it.
Yeah. And as of now, there's 39,478 members.
When I started on Reddit on ex-Mormon in, I will say probably October of 2013 is probably when I started on there. There was about 8,000 or 9,000 people subscribed.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's becoming, I think, probably the most influential community in Mormonism, because it's where information shared, it's where stories are promoted, it's where leaks are being shared. I go to it every day and spend lots of time there. So, Okay, Ryan, let's pause. Scott, you ready to come back with us?
Yep.
Okay, so
I'm here.
So Scott, let's just say 9 years ago, you decide you can't live it anymore. Talk to us about how your life progressed to the point where you were on Reddit. What did your trajectory look like?
Okay, Reddit's very interesting. Let me make one comment. It's actually on your Facebook page, Mormon Stories Podcast. Hector says, why can't people leave the church? Why can't people who leave the church just leave us alone? And his answer is because for so many gay members and many ex-Mormons, the teachings of the church are a matter of life and death, and that's very true. Now, to your question.
Thanks, Hector. Shout out to Hector. Thanks, Hector.
Back to your question, Reddit. Honestly,
no. I mean, 9 years ago is what, 2008, 2009?
Correct. Yep.
So did you check out other things? Were you still connected to Mormonism in some way?
I didn't check out other things. I myself didn't go to church. I went to church when my kids had things, when my granddaughter was blessed, things like that. But for myself, I didn't go to church. I just got a private message saying, "Take off your hat. We can't see your face." So.
No, the hat's great, but do whatever you want. Take off my hat.
I didn't check out other things. So I attended. One of the things my kids said when I came out is, and again, this was 2008, is, Dad, the church teaches it's a choice, and so that's what we believe. But you're our dad, and we will respect your choices if you also respect our choices. And we ask that when you have us every other weekend, that you take us to sacrament meeting. I said, okay, fine, I can do that. So for a couple of years, I did that. Then I stopped going to sacrament meeting with them. But I really didn't check out other things. And it really wasn't until I got involved with MormonLeaks that I was even on Reddit. They had to teach me what Reddit was and everything, because I wasn't on it. I just lived my life.
So you were kind of disconnected from online Mormonism for the past 9 years?
Yep, pretty much.
You didn't listen to podcasts or?
I didn't. Nope. I just lived my life as a gay man. I was involved, in some of the things, especially with the November policy and then the mass resignations. But before that, I really just lived. I wasn't on any podcast. I didn't listen. I wasn't on any.
Wow.
Didn't look at Reddit. Nothing. I just left, stepped away. I wasn't anti. I wasn't looking to find that the church was not true. I just basically became inactive.
So was the November 2015 policy announcement the first thing that kind of really got you engaged?
It was, as far as the church. I was very engaged in.
Wait, say that again. Say you blanked out for a second, Scott. You were engaged in what?
Proposition 8. I followed that. I followed Hawaii Proposition 8. I followed same-sex marriage throughout the country. Some of my good friends turned out to be some of the plaintiffs in the Supreme Court case of Burgefell versus Hodges. So I know them. I was there with them, with Jim Obergefell and with the others at the oral arguments for the Supreme Court. I was with some of the plaintiffs when the decision was handed down by the Supreme Court. So I followed that, and so the church was involved a little bit with with me being involved with following Prop 8. But other than that, I really didn't follow what the church was doing until the November policy, and that lit my fire.
Okay, and that's when you got involved in speaking out to the local media in Salt Lake City?
Exactly.
Okay. All right, good. So, and from then to actually hearing about MormonLeaks, was there some path or trajectory? When did you first hear about MormonLeaks? And then we're going to have Ryan talk about its founding.
Okay, really quick. I knew that Ryan, you were instrumental in leaking the November 2015 policy. Then I really, kind of left it until the October 2016 videos were leaked. And what really got me lit up was the video about WikiLeaks and the 12 apostles asking, if WikiLeaks or another associated group could be a threat to the church. And then what really got me going was where Elder Oaks, all he focused on was, well, is he a confirmed homosexual? That was his question. It wasn't about the other things. It was, is he a confirmed homosexual? And I just couldn't understand why that bothered them so much. What does it matter? And so I co-host a radio show in Salt Lake, and we asked Ryan to be a guest on that, and that's how I got involved with.
What's the radio show?
It's it's Middle Grounders, AM 860 radio. It's actually a conservative talk radio station, but our Middle Grounders, we talk about all topics, and we had Ryan on as a guest right after.
Who's your co-host?
My co-host is Tyson Holbrook.
Tyson, yeah, okay,
absolutely. Tyson.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
He and I do that show Saturday and Sunday mornings. It's rebroadcast on Sunday, and so when we had Ryan on as a guest right after he leaked the videos, that's really what got me involved in MormonLeaks and after that. But I'll let Ryan talk more about that.
Okay, so really quick, how long have you been doing Middle Grounders?
Over a year, and I was invited as that started with me being a guest on Middle Grounders, and then Tyson asked me to be a co-host with him. And
again, Middle Grounders is what? It talks about what? Its focus?
We talk about everything. There's no topics that we don't talk about. So we've actually had New Name Noah as a guest.
But is it a Mormon-themed podcast?
It is not. It's just everything political. We talk about Utah politics. We talk about national politics. We talk about Trump. We talk about Hillary Clinton.
And is it once a week?
It's once a week, Saturdays from 10 to 11 Utah time, and then it's rebroadcast on Sundays.
And it's on what station? AM 860. Okay, cool. All right, shout out to Tyson.
And one of the things we talked about is Utah teen suicide rate. That was a big one. So yeah,
okay.
We talk about all things.
Really quick, what is it about? First of all, what was that like to be watching a video where the leaders of the Mormon Church, the top leaders, First Presidency, Quorum of the 12, they're sitting there talking about this threat of transparency, where people are creating these WikiLeaks sites to promote transparency, and then to have the question be asked, are the people involved confirmed homosexuals? First of all, what was that like for you, Scott, to hear that? And then what do you think that's about?
It was very offensive to me, very offensive. And immediately.
Why? Why is it offensive?
number one, honestly, because they can't use the word gay. So that's one interesting thing that I had a problem with. But it's offensive that that's what they focus on.
What's offensive about the term confirmed homosexual? What's offensive about that?
I think it goes to me that the church can't use the word gay. They say same-sex attraction, confirmed homosexual. Why can't they just say someone's gay? You know, and maybe that's just me, but, you know, it goes back to, like I said, same-sex attraction. No, I'm gay. I don't have same-sex attraction.
And what does the word confirmed mean?
You know, I don't know, but one of the things that we joke about is being a confirmed homosexual, and if that includes the laying out of hands, but that's a whole different thing. But
like, does that mean that they have spies that are going to make sure that when they copulate, that they have video footage of the copulation? Like, what does it mean to confirm someone's a homosexual?
I think it's a priesthood ordinance, but let's.
John, if our text chats behind the scenes at MormonLeaks were to ever get out, there's a lot of jokes about being a confirmed homosexual. A lot.
It just feels so backwards, you know, to say confirmed homosexual.
It does, and once that came out, and once, you know, Ryan and the MormonLeaks team got me on Reddit, that's the Reddit name that I used, and I picked that basically of, you know, I'm proud. They took it, I think, derogatory, but I'm proud to be a confirmed homosexual. And, you know, that's my Reddit handle now. That's what I go by. And everyone, even on MormonLeaks, we talk about, you know, me being a confirmed homosexual and things like that. So, you know, to me, it's an honor. I don't think that's what they were taking it, but it was very offensive to me that Elder Oaks wasn't even concerned in my mind about the topic at hand, which was, is WikiLeaks or other leak groups like that a threat to the church?
Or how about something deeper? And I'm hearing a clicking sound on your end, Scott, if your hands are doing something that's causing clicking. But how about something deeper, which is him concerned about whether the church needs to be more transparent about their information, right? It's not. He's not concerned about that. He's not concerned about WikiLeaks and whistleblowers. He's concerned about the gays, right?
Exactly. And it brings back, you know, the point of, why are the 12 apostles obsessed about gays? I don't understand it.
I mean, because there's child molesters, there's pyramid schemes, financial fraud, there's sex trafficking, there's gambling, there's illegal drug use. Like, there's a billion things.
There's suicide.
Yeah, mental health problems.
Right.
There's adultery. Like, there's a million things you could focus on, right?
I think the 12 apostles are more obsessed about gay sex than the gays are.
Yeah, it's weird. Okay. All right, Scott, we're going to go back to Ryan now. So Ryan, and actually this is going to sort of represent part one of my Mormon Stories interview, because it sort of takes us up until the point where Ryan, you kind of start WikiLeaks. So I'm just going to say thanks to you guys for being a part of part one. Ryan, your story was really moving to me. I sense a lot of sincerity. I sense a lot of conviction. I sense that you were a real true believer until you weren't. And all that speaks to your character, to me, and credibility. And Scott, I just have to say, those 5 or 10 minutes where you were telling your story, we're 700 plus hours into Mormon Stories. And that's some of the most powerful stuff I've ever heard on Mormon Stories. So Scott, this was a precious gem, this first hour and a half. And I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in so far.
A guy named, last name Levitt. I'm blanking on his first name right now, but people from Las Vegas or St. George know exactly who I'm talking about, because almost everybody is related to him. He had like 50 wives or something like that. And he lived in southern Utah and southern Nevada area. And a lot of people down here are related to him. It's kind of a big joke here in Las Vegas to say that you're related to this guy, Levitt. But anyway, so my mom is a convert. She converted before she met my dad. And then So I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and I mean, I kind of grew up in a normal, typical LDS family. I moved around a lot and mostly lived in places that were not with really very little to no LDS presence. So I was usually either the only one or one of a few Mormons, of my classmates. So that might be an experience that was different from most people that grew up in Utah. I was never surrounded by the Mormon machine, if you will.
Okay. Is it Dudley Levitt? Is that the name of
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Dudley. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm related to one of his wives, I branched down from one of his wives.
Yeah. And my good friend Dave Christian is also a descendant of Dudley Levitt. And I'm sure Governor Levitt, Mike Levitt of Utah, is a descendant as well.
Yeah, I think he's pretty much, I think all the Levitts go back to him. And like I said, it's like a big inside joke here in Las Vegas when you meet somebody and everybody's related to this guy.
Right. So in terms of your Mormon experience growing up, did you go to church as a kid? Did you sing the primary songs? Did you go to seminary? Did you believe it? Were you into it or not?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely into it. We went to church every Sunday. We even made every effort to go to church on vacation. When we were on vacation, we would always try to find a word. So we were definitely very dedicated to going to church on Sunday. And for the most part, we followed all of the tenets of Mormonism. I mean, maybe we watched football on Sunday, and I know some Mormons don't do that, but I would say that up till my mission, I would say that I was mostly 100% into it. I mean, obviously I had my moments of teen rebellion, but I wouldn't say that
you goofed off a little bit as a teen.
Yeah, but I don't think it was ever because I was doubting the church. It was just because of, dumb things teenagers do, right? So
And you said there were a few Mormons in your high school?
Yeah. I mean, especially in high school, I was almost always like the only one in my grade level, and there might have been a couple in the whole school. So I grew up in South and Central America from 6th grade until I graduated, and so I went to private schools.
Where?
I lived in Venezuela, Guatemala, Honduras. I was in Peru a little bit. I graduated high school.
Was your dad in the State Department?
Yeah, basically. My dad worked for the government, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is your Spanish super good?
Yeah. Well, I served my mission in Spain as well, and my wife is from Spain, and so I rarely, if ever, even speak English to my kids.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that at all.
Yeah, I know. Most people don't know.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is March 23rd, 2017. I'm tuning in from the basement of my home in North Logan, Utah, and I'm really excited to have with me two people who have made a pretty big impact on Mormonism in a pretty short time. They are Ryan McKnight and Scott Fausett, two of the main leaders behind MormonLeaks. And so today we're going to be doing sort of three things. We're going to be learning a little bit about Ryan and Scott and their backgrounds and what led to them wanting to do this project. Then we're going to talk about the project itself, how they did it, what was hard about it, how they structured it, what's been sort of the main reactions to it, and then we want to take questions and comments from our listeners. We hope that we won't just have sympathetic people who are listening and asking questions and giving comments. We hope that those who don't like MormonLeaks will also share comments and questions as well, and we can have a healthy dialogue. And we're doing this live streamed to Facebook Live. so that we can have a collaboration. We also have people joined us through Zoom itself. And so we're just excited. So with that, Ryan McKnight, welcome to Mormon Stories Podcast. Again, welcome back.
Hello, how you doing? Thanks for inviting us to do this. And on your point real quick about the questions, no questions are off limits. So if anybody, keep it respectful, but we'll take any question no matter how challenging it might be.
Are you a confirmed homosexual?
I'm sure in the eyes of Dallin Oaks I am.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. I couldn't resist.
Oh no,
that was a joke.
We joke about this constantly behind
that was actually a MormonLeaks contextual inside joke.
Yeah.
Because for those who don't know, one of the videos MormonLeaks offered was a video of Dallin H. Oaks and other apostles discussing WikiLeaks, and the founder of WikiLeaks was Julian Assange. And
they were one. Yeah, I mean, they were talking about how Chelsea Manning was a confirmed homosexual. Then they were wondering whether
Chelsea
or not.
Manning. Okay, yeah.
And then they also wondered whether or not Julian Assange also might be gay.
Yeah. So
okay,
that was the inside joke.
Yeah,
that was the inside joke.
Hey, John, you mentioned it's an inside joke, but it really is an inside joke here at MormonLeaks, and we talk about it often because I am a confirmed homosexual.
Yes, well, I was getting there, Scott. Scott, I was getting there next. So, Scott Fausett, welcome also to
Thank you
to Mormon Stories. It's great to have you on for the first time.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Where are you dialing in from?
I'm dialing in from Dallas, Texas.
Dallas, Texas. All right, go Cowboys.
Oh, no. Kansas City Chiefs.
Don't
Chiefs.
Don't start this one here.
Okay, all right, go Chiefs. Go Chiefs. All right, so welcome to you both. Thanks to all the people who are joining us live. And so let's just begin. Now, Scott, I don't think people really associate your name as broadly with MormonLeaks as they do Ryan. But let me just ask, and we'll talk about that and if that's been hard or what that means. But let's just say that if we were going to go to the very beginning, would it be Ryan or Scott who sort of was the beginning impetus for this?
Absolutely, it was Ryan.
Okay, so Ryan, let's talk a bit about your story, and I'm going to pause you at some point, and then I'm going to kick over and have Scott talk about his story, and then we'll actually jump to the founding of MormonLeaks. But Ryan, let's back up and just talk to us about your kind of Mormon pedigree or non-pedigree, as it were.
Okay. Well, I was born into the church. On my dad's side of the family, goes back all the way to the pioneer days. I think the earliest ancestor that joined the church was during Brigham Young's time. And he was actually part of the group of people who came down and at Brigham Young's direction and settled what is now Las Vegas. For those that don't know, Las Vegas was actually settled originally by the Mormons. Now, he wasn't anybody like famous or anything. He was just part of the group of people. So on my dad's side, there's definitely a long, rich history of Mormons. I'm related to